They were 13 minutes caught between two infinities, the thin envelope of human invention and the yawning, indifferent surface of another world. In those minutes, a machine made of aluminum and wire and gold foil answered the old, reckless question of whether people could leave their home and stand on something that was not Earth. They began with perfect calculations and ended with a man's hand on a metal stick, every second a negotiation between algorithms and instincts, between 1,000 engineers' predictions and the stubborn, uncanny reality of rock and dust. The mission had been decades in the making and minutes in its finality. A towering rocket had already done its loud, precise work. Orbits were established, trajectories had been resolved. Now the lunar module detached, a small, awkward craft designed for exactly this moment, to slow a descent that orbital mechanics had arranged, to translate horizontal speed into vertical patience, to find a foothold on a landscape no human had ever trod. Inside, the cabin was bright with instrument panels, with switches and readouts, and the steady, low notes of pumps and fans. Outside, the moon hung, a pale world of shadow and silver, a horizon sharp as glass. The first pulse of descent began with a change in attitude and purpose. Engines throttled. Velocity bled away. The lander, which had been a passenger of orbital grace, became a controlled fall. Over the next minutes, the craft would pass through altitudes that on Earth would be routine, hundreds of meters, tens of meters. But here they were moments of revelation. The surface revealed as textures and patterns, sunlit ridges and sudden dark bowls, boulder fields the size of houses and regolith so fine it would puff like chalk. The instruments reported numbers, vertical speed, horizontal drift, altitude above the measured surface. The guidance computer digested accelerations and angles and fed corrections to the engine and to the pilot's hand. But numbers are abstract things until they collide with the unexpected. Midway through the descent, the system began to call attention to itself in a language of alarms. The guidance computer, brilliant but limited by the hardware and the loads placed upon it, started returning executive overflow, a way of saying it had more to do than it could do at once. The extra demands were not mysterious. A radar system meant to support rendezvous had been left active, feeding the computer with data it did not need for landing. The result was a pile-up of processing priorities. Tasks were interrupted and restarted. Lights flashed. The software had been designed for failure. It shed low-priority chores and kept the essential ones alive. The alarms were loud in the mind, even if their meaning lay in instructions and tables. On the ground, technicians in Houston parsed the fault codes and with a dispassionate urgency decided that the computer was still capable of its primary task. The descent would go on. Inside the module, the soundscape was small and human. Fingertips brushed switches. Eyes tracked a horizon that could not be reassured by simulations. The lunar surface was not a photograph. It moved and scaled as the craft descended. Shadows lengthened, contrasts sharpened. The engine plume changed the world beneath them, lifting clouds of dust that would fold back into the moon's vacuum and paint a close-up theater of grays. Through small windows, the astronauts saw risky and beautiful geometry, a valley that would swallow a long footpad, a field of protruding boulders, a slope that might be treacherous. The machine's gyros and accelerometers told one story. The human eye told another. At this point, the human decision became decisive. Automated systems, for all their accuracy, cannot yet account for the fine texture of a real surface under a specific light. A pilot took in the spatial cues, the tilt of a rock, the scattering of shadows, and chose a margin where machines had predicted none. Manual control meant transferring authority from an algorithm running on fixed cycles to a hand that could sample the world in a single glance and apply judgment in milliseconds. The pilot nudged the hand controller, rotating, translating, steering the module away from certain danger. The engine responded in a calculus of thrust and fuel, a compromise between the need to bleed more velocity and the need to save a finite commodity. Fuel, always a contained drama, became an audible measure of risk. The descent had consumed margins that were never generous. As the lander hovered and inched toward an acceptable landing spot, numbers on the gauges tightened like a noose. There were seconds of fuel left that could not be replaced. Every hover was a negotiation between caution and consumption. The weight of that reality was not theatrical. It was a constant statistical pressure. Yet it was also the crucible where courage was measured. Not theatrical daring, but an accumulation of competence, patience, and trust in training. The pilot's eye and the instrument's needle were both authorities. The right balance would decide whether a lunar module came to rest gently or whether it became a harsh lesson in the unforgiving arithmetic of spaceflight. As the lander descended into the last 100 meters, the surface began to assert itself in detail. The regolith's texture, the way light clung to tiny ridges, the shadows of small rocks, these were the things that would make a landing ceremonious or catastrophic. Finally, the skids felt the moon's bite. There was a soft mechanical confirmation, a change in load, a settling, a vibration through metal that had been designed to take precisely this kind of shock. Instruments ticked, the cabin became quieter. Outside, a plume of dust settled back to the surface like a slow settling of breath. The first pause that mattered after touchdown was a human one, a moment to breathe, to understand that the improbable had been achieved. Instrumentation confirmed what human senses already suspected. The lander was still balanced on its legs. The descent engine shut down. The immediate danger was alleviated, but the job was not yet complete. Systems were secured, checks were made. For those on the ground, it was a reading of telemetry and a brief, nearly unbearable patience. For the crew, it was containment and a retooling of focus from movement to habitation, from motion to presence. They had trudged through 13 minutes of concentrated uncertainty and arrived on an alien plane that would, within hours, hold the first human footstep. Those minutes, the intervals between the throttle adjustments, the alarms, the decisions, reveal a precise anatomy of exploration. There was brilliance in the mathematics and electronics that guided 100 control loops a second. There was also, irreducibly, human grit, training that turned muscle memory into a tool, judgment that translated visual cues into corrective action, and a willingness to accept risk calibrated by competence. The descent was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of thousands of minds and hands across years. Software engineers, propulsion specialists, metallurgists, controllers who watched numbers stream across consoles, all of them had contributed to a single fragile moment when a machine had to translate calculation into contact. This balance between human judgment and automated precision set a precedent. It was not that one was superior to the other, but that they complemented each other. The computer could calculate millions of operations flawlessly. The human could interpolate from a glance an aesthetic and practical judgment no program could yet encode. The alarms were a reminder that design must account not only for ideal conditions, but for the messy, real world. The pilot's manual correction reminded us that systems must be capable of ceding authority back to people when the situation demands it. In those 13 minutes, an entire philosophy of exploration, redundancies, cross-checks, clear lines of responsibility, composure under pressure, was welded into practice. What was altered by those minutes was not only what men could do in one place, but how they would think about their place elsewhere. The moon became accessible, not just in the imagination, but as a reachable destination. The scale of human activity extended. The images and the events that followed the landing would reframe politics and culture, art and science. But the deeper change was quieter and more structural. a renewed confidence that complex systems could carry fragile human beings across hostile environments if design embraced the limits of both machine and mind. There is also a more intimate lesson embedded in the details, that monumental achievements are often decided in near anonymous moments, in precise technical calls, and in the steady hands of operators in cramped consoles. The drama is not only in the final flourish, it is in countless calibrations no camera ever captured, in the cool calculations of a guidance officer parsing error codes, in a pilot's carefully judged sightline. The moon landing was a chapter, but those 13 minutes were the paragraph where intent met reality, and where failure was rendered complicated enough to be avoided. When you look back from a later era, where satellites and probes and robotic explorers make routine what was once impossible, it is easy to forget the precariousness of that descent. To stand in the shadow of that moment is to recognize that every step forward in exploration is a negotiation with unknowns, that precision and humility must be companions, and that courage often looks like patience, punctuated by exacting skill. The lunar surface took no notice of any of this. It accepted the lander with the same impartial indifference it shows to meteorites and ancient lava flows. But for us, for the people who had wrestled with equations and engines and decisions, those 13 minutes became an emblem, not of triumph alone, but of the way humans and their creations can, together, meet the hostile facts of other worlds and say, "We will try." Time, patient and slow, measures history not merely in dates, but in the compressed intervals where choice supersedes chance. In 13 minutes above a gray plain, humanity's capacity for invention and for calm decision touched a distant world. That small, quiet interval was not an arrival so much as a proof that when the calculations were right, when people stayed composed, and when machines surrendered authority to judgment when needed, the seemingly impossible could be made to happen. The moon did not change. We did. And in that change lay the invitation to go on, beyond the moment, beyond the orbit, into the next set of 13 minutes, waiting to define us again.